It's your boy Online Davo, and we back with a video. Look, we got a video by Elijah Miller, how Reagan ruined everything. Now, if y'all been watching my channel, y'all know I dislike this guy. I hate this guy with a passion. Only thing he has ever done is make Black America lives worse. And he is one of the many reasons on why we're in this situation we're in right now with these shitty laws and some of the stuff that he has stood for in his policies are rearing his ugly head right now. So come on, let's get right into it.
And make America great again.
Make America great again.
Make America great again.
And we will make America great again.
Ronald Reagan for president.
Classic.
Let's make America great again.
Ronald Reagan is considered by some to be the greatest president in the history of the United States. I've always understood that to mean that people loved his version of supply-side economics, also known as trickle-down economics. Tax the rich less, and the benefits would trickle down to all of society. That's just basic economics. Well, it turns out, no it's not, and also Reagan's trickle-down theory is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the many theories and agendas that Reagan pushed during his administration. Ronald Reagan was elected president in 1980. The 8 years that followed ushered in not only the largest redistribution of wealth in a generation, but also the termination of welfare benefits for thousands of Americans, a dramatic rollback of unions and labor organizing, and an infiltration of Christian fundamentalism into American government, the consequences of which we are still very much feeling to this day. Ronald Reagan walked so that Donald Trump could run, and he altered the American way of life for everyone but the top 1%. 40 years after first being elected president, the myth of Ronald Reagan still lives on in the minds of people who are too deluded to see that the American dream Reagan stood for is the same American dream he irreversibly decimated during his time as president. This is how Reagan ruined everything.
And you know what's crazy too? People will call him the greatest president, all that shit. That lets me know they don't even factor in Black people when it comes to policies or anything like that. Like, because the shit that he did and the things he put in place that has affected Black people purposely, there's no way he should be in no one's type of celebratory list of greatest presidents. Facts. How can you be a great president when you purposely doing all this crazy shit to Black people? Like, come on, that's what I'm standing on. If the president ain't make no strides for bettering Black people, then I don't give a fuck about him. Facts. Those are the only presidents I celebrate on President's Day. Matter of fact, I ain't celebrating none of them, but those are the only ones I'll acknowledge. Well, greatest president. Please. Egypt. Nice intro.
Before I get into all the ways that Reagan royally screwed us over, I want to take a minute to thank my partner on today's video, Hungry Root. Hungry Root is an online grocery little gold that gives Reagan more credit than he deserves. Our system was fucked enough to produce and support a man like Reagan as president. He didn't just appear out of thin air. But it is hard to pinpoint another president that has had such enduring and wide-ranging negative impacts on the American way of life. I'm gonna unpack Reagan's impact by focusing on who and what he hurt, namely the middle class, minorities, and democracy. Starting with the middle class, let's talk about what Reagan is most known for: Reaganomics, a theory of supply-side economics that says that by removing regulations on businesses and lowering their taxes, they would be able to be more productive, have more freedom to be agile in the market, and that growth would then translate to more jobs and higher wages for workers. The wealth would start at the top and it would trickle down to everyone. When Reagan took office, the US was going through what was called stagflation, where both inflation and unemployment rates were high. The country was in the worst recession since the Great Depression at the time. Because of this, people were primed for major economic change, and Reagan ushered in that change. After the Great Depression, the New Deal came with huge amounts of government spending on everything from mortgage financing for whites only, more on that in my last video on housing segregation, to job creation, to building infrastructure, and these government programs were popular because they did grow the economy and create jobs and build a large, thriving middle class in America. Minimum wages stayed consistent with productivity. The more productive the average worker was, the more the minimum wage increased. That connection was broken.
And let's not forget, only certain race or subset of people were able to benefit from this, from these policies and from this stuff that was taking action, you know. And that's why I keep in mind also. Yeah, you know, America was going through these prosperous times, but my people weren't. It's as simple as that. Make America great again for who? For who? When has it been great for black people? I'm gonna always mention that. You'll never want to not hear me say that, because that's never been great for black people. You know what I'm saying? Like, come on, man. Maybe decent. Maybe alright. You know, if you ignore everything else, if you ignore all the racism and discrimination and you know, all these police killing people, all type of stuff. If you ignore that, maybe America been cool to you, but great? Nah, man. Ain't shit gonna be great in America until everybody is treated equally. Facts.
However, as the US tax code began moving away from the New Deal. Reagan wasn't the sole president responsible for creating tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans, but he sure did it with the most gusto and to the largest degree. Before Reagan's presidency, income tax on the wealthiest Americans, that's the money that they had to pay to the government as a proportion of how much they made each year, was at 70%. So above a certain threshold, the wealthiest Americans had to pay 70% of their income to the government. By the end of Reagan's presidency, that number dropped to 28%. He also created major tax breaks for corporations and estates, all in the name of creating smaller government and putting more money in the hands of the wealthiest people and companies in the country. Some of the effects of his economic policies in the short term were positive. The period of stagflation became less pronounced. Inflation and unemployment both decreased, but those numbers belie the fact that the connection between wealth and productivity was severed, and the rich got richer while the poor and middle class saw very little economic progress during this time. The incomes of the lowest 90%.
We kept on working hard. You know what I'm saying? We kept on putting in the hours, but the money never followed. I mean, shit. When was the last time that wages had kept up with inflation? Was this the last time? Because it's like, bro, the more as time go on, you buying less shit. In a minute, they're only being a minimalist is going to be the standard. In a minute, they want to have all these products and sell shit to us. But we're not making no money. We don't have no extra money to spend because all our money is going towards necessities. Ain't that something? They want to take away our money, but also sell us shit to take our money. Come on, man. You got to pick one.
Rose by 17%, while those of the top 10% rose by 106%. Talk about a trickle. In the years since Reagan's presidency,
What'd she say?
90% rose by 17%, while those of the top 10% rose by 106%. Talk about a trickle. In the years since Reagan's presidency, that gap between rich and poor has continued to widen.
Yeah, the trickle is the 1% pissing on you. That's the trickle. If you feel like trickle economics working, no, that's them pissing on you, gang. Okay? Trickle down economics. Reaganomics. Oh, man. Some people are put on earth to just cause destruction. You know what I'm saying? They use whatever talents they have to cause destruction. Somewhere along the way, they got lost in the sauce and they chose a different type of way of living. And his way of living was benefiting the 1%. The poor, the middle class, please. But these people get tricked. They get tricked by a good smile, someone in a nice suit, just enough racism to not be totally blatant, with just enough benefit of the doubt. Voila. You are our president. Racist? For the 1%. What else? Bigotry? Take away welfare? Individualism? Dog whistles? We gonna choose you. America's gonna choose you. Because that's what America knows and that's what America loves. Facts.
Today, the top 10% of income earners in the US hold 72% of the total wealth. And the bottom half of income earners, the 50% of the American population, holds 2% of the wealth. Between 1978 and 2021, average worker compensation increased 18.1%.
Okay, let's read this, y'all. Income growth over time. Post-tax income growth by U.S. income group. 1946 to 1980. So that's about 34 years. Bottom 50%, 129. Middle 50 to 90%, 98%. The top 10%, 69%. The top 1%, 58%. Wow. But look at this. From 1980 to 2014. So when Reagan, bitch ass, got into office, look how it flipped. Oh my God. This is so disgusting. The bottom 50% of people is 21%. Middle 50 to 90, 49%. The top 10%, 113%. The top 1%, 194%. Wow. They shit grew by 194%. That's crazy.
The top CEO compensation increased 1,460% in that same time period. In 1980, the average CEO earned 36 times more money than the average worker, and today the average CEO earns 400 times more. The wealthiest have never been wealthier, while for the average worker, wages haven't even kept up with inflation. This shit ain't tricklin', Ronnie. What now? And it's not like at the time Reagan implemented trickle-down economics in the early 80s that it was this brand new, newfangled invention that everyone was optimistic about. A lot of people were like, hey, this is really gonna hurt poor people. But Ronnie was convinced by his neoliberal economic pals that keeping the wealthiest people happy will mean prosperity for all. Because Ronald Reagan was convinced that the American dream was alive and well. And the common theme through all of his policy choices was that individuals are the creators of their own destiny. Anyone could pick themselves up by their bootstraps if they really wanted to, and that any struggling was simply a moral.
I mean, I got a question for you. Was he really convinced about the American dream? Or was his goal to sell you that he believed in the American dream? That he believed you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps? That he actually genuinely believed that cutting their taxes would mean more money for you? That's the question you gotta ask yourself. But then, if you can't answer that question, look around at other policies. Look around what else he supported and how those affected certain people. And then you go back to the original question, and then you have your answer.
Failure on the part of the individual, and not a failing on the part of the system that stood on their necks. And it was through Reagan that this idea that the government is your enemy and stands in the way of your freedom and prosperity really took hold in the Republican consciousness writ large, to the point that working and middle-class people voted to re-elect him, even though it was actively against their own best interest to do so. Sound familiar? This was clear in his trickle-down economic policy, but it was also clear in his stance on labor rights. The 20th century saw a peak in labor unions, especially in the 40s and 50s, when over 1/3 of all workers in the US were members of a union. Unions were strong and could mount strong challenges against employers, and they brought about important labor laws like the 8-hour workday, minimum wage, child labor laws, and civil rights laws in the 1960s. During this period, Ronald Reagan himself was the president of the Screen Actors Guild, a labor union for actors. At some point in the 50s, Ronald flipped from Democrat to Republican. He claimed it was because his party, the Democrats, failed him. It could also be that while he was president of the Screen Actors Guild, he granted a rare waiver to MCA, his own talent agency, to allow them to start producing television shows. They needed a waiver because it was a real conflict of interest when the people who manage talent become the people who also hire the talent. You see, after that waiver was granted, Reagan conveniently was given a cushy TV job through MCA that paid him $125,000 per year in 1950s money, and he became a walking spokesman for GE.
$125,000 a year in 1950s? Oh my gosh. And look what he had to do to get in that position. Just, do some slimy little stuff, that's all. Nothing crazy, just pulling himself up by his bootstraps. That's all he doing. He just working hard, but not hardly working. Head ass.
An influencer before there were influencers. The FBI eventually investigated MCA and the waiver granted to them by the Screen Actors Guild, including Reagan, for anti-competitive behavior. Nothing came of the probe for Reagan, though MCA was forced to break up. It was around this time that Reagan conveniently was like, you know what? Fuck unions. Fuck the government. Too many regulations. I'm a Republican now. Interesting. But he, of course, used his history as a union president to his advantage while running for governor of California and later for United States president, pointing out that he was the only candidate who's actually been president of a labor union in order to win over the working class white vote. Convenient.
Where free unions and collective bargaining are forbidden, freedom is lost.
And a lot of them voted for him. which was against their self-interest. And that was made abundantly clear not long into his presidency when in 1981, PATCO, the Air Traffic Controllers Union, went on strike to demand better working conditions and increased pay. See, the problem with this is that the workers were technically federal employees, and it was against the law for federal employees to strike. Roughly half of all US flights were grounded during the strike. And Reagan held a press conference on the matter and made his stance very clear.
And if they do not report for work within 48 hours, they have forfeited their jobs and will be terminated.
Wow.
And then 2 days later, 12,000 federal air traffic controllers lost their jobs and were barred from ever working for the federal government again. It was a show of strength that debilitated the organized labor movement, and it hasn't recovered since. Where at its peak, union membership
12,000 air traffic controlmen. You got people that's probably rookies. You got people that have been in there 1 year, 10 years, 20 years, and they can never work for the federal government again. Oh, nigga, you were trying to strike? You want to improve your life? You trying to improve your working conditions? Are you dumb? Do you not know who I am? I'm Big Ron. I'm Big Ronald. I don't go for that. You know what I'm saying? If it don't benefit the 1%, it don't benefit me, baby. That's how you gotta think about these people, man. Crazy. That's nasty.
Accounted for over a third of all workers in the United States. By the end of Reagan's presidency, that number was cut in half. Today, union membership accounts for roughly 10% of all workers, which is a historic low. The reason for this dramatic decrease in union members is twofold. One, Reagan's firing of the air traffic controllers sent a strong message to the private sector that union busting is fair game. And two, Reagan appointed his own cronies to head the National Labor Relations Board, the federal board that oversees unions. And they worked to loosen regulations on businesses and let them get away with like nearly whatever they wanted. And the suppression of the labor movement is shown in the numbers, not only in the dwindling number of union members, but also in the dramatic decrease in strikes, a common tool used by unions to counteract the power imbalance between workers and corporations. Prior to 1979, there were on average...
That's crazy. It went from 1/3 to 10% of people are in the union. And then you have people in the union voting for people that trying to get rid of the union or trying to make the union weaker. Oh man, propaganda is a powerful tool. And anyone can succumb to it. That's why you must stay up to date. That's why you must read, learn media literacy. I'm still learning also. I ain't perfect. You know what I'm saying? But you gotta watch videos like this and be open-minded. Because boy, a useful idiot is still a useful person.
Between 200 and 400 large-scale labor strikes on any given year. There were 187 in 1980. By 1989, there were 40. And in 2017, there were 7. Even the recent stirrings we've seen to unionize Amazon facilities, Starbucks coffee shops, and recently the first unionized strip club pales in comparison to the power of the labor unions in the middle of the 20th century that helped shift the balance of power away from the large corporations who had all the money and all the bargaining chips into the hands of workers. For example, my experience, having worked numerous jobs in the 21st century, is that companies treat you like they're doing you a favor by giving you a job. Like, you should be so lucky. And like, you have to show loyalty to the company above all else, otherwise you're a bad worker. They pay you what they want, they fire you whenever they want, and they do not have to give one flying fart about you because you are replaceable to them. They hold all the power. You want a job, take it or leave it. Most of them don't even list the pay range on their job postings unless they're legally required to. And if you were to ask for the pay range up front before putting in the effort to apply for the job, well, you might as well just not apply for the job because no hiring manager is going to look favorably on that.
That's crazy.
You're supposed to want the job because you're passionate about widgets and working.
You can't even ask them how much you're going to get paid. What you mean? You want to know how much you're going to get paid? Nigga, be happy you even in the building. That's how they thinking. Oh, man. But this is what happens when you give all the power to the top 1%. You give it to the corporation owners, the CEOs and all that. Damn, bro. That's why unions are important. I'll tell you that. I tried to get into the union myself. I tried. I even passed the test, but they talking about, damn, got no work. Fuck it. I'm moving on to the next thing. But it's like, man, bro, nowadays you gotta, hey, look, you gotta get lucky, or you could work, gotta get some experience, but it's hard to get a union nowadays. I'll tell you that. Shit, they be hiding the information, all type of shit, bro, for real.
for that company. Doing a job for money is not the team player attitude that we're looking for. Not to mention the fact that HR exists to keep the company from getting sued, not to protect your interests. So you can see how unions are so powerful because it's only through collective bargaining and organizing that workers can balance out the power with their employers. Okay, sorry, I needed to go down that labor organizing tangent, but it really can't be overstated the devastating impact of the Reagan administration on workers' rights and workers' income. This combination, the huge tax cuts for the wealthy and the busting of unions, absolutely decimated the middle class and concentrated the power and money in the hands of big business and the top 10%. But it wasn't just the middle class he was coming after. Before taking office, Reagan ran for president in 1976 and lost the Republican nomination to incumbent Gerald Ford. During that first presidential run, Reagan was touting the failures of big government and discussing what he claimed was rampant abuse of the country's welfare system. And he kept coming back to this same story.
In Chicago, they found a woman who holds the record. She used 80 names, 30 addresses, 15 telephone numbers to collect food stamps, Social Security, veterans benefits for 4 non-existent deceased veterans' husbands, as well as welfare. Her tax-free cash income alone has been running $150,000 a year.
The welfare queen. You know her, you love her. She's a scam artist. She's having babies just to make more money from the government. She's a liar. She's a cheat. She's sucking the system dry. She's black and she's everywhere. Boo. In reality,
fuck it, use your imagination. Who do you think of because of propaganda? Well, who do you think of when you think of welfare queen? Be honest. That means it's working. That means you have been propagandized. And that's okay, because now you're able to identify it. But it's so crazy, bro. Republicans and these people, they go off of fear. They need something to be feared. They need something to be scared of. They need something that needs my energy. I have to stop this from happening. We have to get these trans out of here. We gotta get these blacks out of here. We gotta get these Hispanics out of here. We always gotta do something to somebody. We can never focus on ourselves. We can never focus on our country. We can never up in the welfare. We can never put in things in place for housing. But you worry about the homeless. Come on, man. But you voting against the homeless, though. Damn. I'm telling you, bro. This country, man. Shit.
this story Reagan kept telling out of Chicago was about a woman named Linda Taylor. Her crimes were many. She was a scam artist. She was tried and convicted of welfare fraud, but the total they could prove she ever defrauded the government for was $8,000. Not $150,000 per year. Nor was she an accurate example of welfare recipients.
Oh, so him and Ronald Reagan, Ronald Reagan and Trump just alike. They both just be lying. They just be talking out their neck, but the people that follow them believe it. So she only confirmed 8,000, but he talking about 150,000, and this was what, 1970s, late 70s? Man, these people wasn't searching that up. They was going off his word. He white and he got authority. Because you know, these people, the thing with conservatives, it's about conserving a hierarchy. It's about clear hierarchy, about clear levels. You're poor, you don't get the same benefits as him. He's a top 1%. You know what I'm saying? I'm middle class. You don't get the same benefits as me, bro. You feel me? I'm white. You don't get the same benefits as me. You know what I'm saying? That's the mindset when it comes with these conservatives. You know, at least the racist ones. Let's throw that out there. At least they're racist ones. But the point is that they appeal to authority. And with that, if you're an authoritative figure like Ronald Reagan, Donald Trump, and you live and die by this conservative shit, you know what I'm saying? You might just be a professional writer. You know what I'm saying? If that's what you're going off of, 8,000 to 150,000. God damn.
Because most welfare recipients were and are white people, an uncomfortable truth that detractors don't want to face. Nor is there any shame in benefiting from that system. I've benefited from food stamps, unemployment, and veterans benefits numerous times throughout my childhood and adult life. In fact, in many
I done benefited. EBT, Section 8, programs. That done kept me alive. That done kept roof over my head, all type of stuff. I'm gonna be real. Ain't no shame in that. That's why I'm like, I can't in my right mind go against that. I could be like, yo, we could put more money towards it, or the government needs to, redistribute the money accordingly, but just being totally against welfare and being totally against Section 8 and EBT, when I had to use that shit to really live and put food on the table, put food in my mouth, please, that's crazy. I ain't never gonna forget that. Like, what? But these people get to a certain status in life, and they forget it. You know, they think that they were just so special that they got out. Nah, bro. You just happen to, you know, make it squeeze through the cracks, to be honest.
States' welfare benefits are actually underutilized due to how difficult it is to get signed up for them and to stay signed up for them. Also, most people who defraud the welfare system are men. But Linda Taylor became the welfare queen, a scapegoat for Republicans to use as they blamed black people for what white supremacy did to them, while also decimating public safety net programs. And it's a trope that persists to this day, though usually only in veiled terms and dog whistles. And black women and welfare recipients weren't the only minorities hurt during the Reagan administration. Nancy and Ronnie were also big proponents of just say no and the beginning of the war on drugs. Drug users were another convenient scapegoat, and Reagan was responsible for
just say no. I wish we could say that to these children that's using fentanyl. I wish we could say that to them. I wish we could say that to these kids that's using meth, heroin. I wish we could say that to them. Just say no. Alright, just put it down. Okay? You have free will. Just turn around. You know what I'm saying? That's what they told us. You know? But hey, man. Just say no.
Slashing government programs that would have helped people get housed, get clean, or receive the mental health support they needed. And instead he was like, nah, just throw those guys in jail. And more people were also becoming unhoused because of the dramatic tax cuts for the wealthy and decrease in public safety net programs. And being unhoused or doing drugs were seen by Reagan and his supporters not as failures of a system meant to protect and lift up its people, but instead a moral failure of the individual. You're an addict because you decided to do drugs, and that's the only reason. You're unhoused because you're lazy and you won't just apply for a job. This has nothing to do with our policies or the changes we're creating in society. That's a separate issue.
That's crazy. To think that every homeless person is lazy is like, find me any faster way to tell me you're an idiot. Honestly. Think of any faster way. Because what? Like, okay, yeah, some of them may just be quote unquote lazy or unmotivated or, you know, just high as fuck. You feel me? Do your thing. Live your life. Free will. You know? But some people, probably most people, they really just fell on hard times, and as we know, Americans do not be having no type of savings. We know how hard it is to get a job. DoorDash, Uber, alright. Prices of shit is going up, so it's like more people gonna be homeless. Every single body lazy. So when your cousin become homeless, tell him that he lazy and tell him to pull himself by his bootstraps when your cousin become homeless, since everybody's so damn lazy. But you ain't gonna do that though, because you know your cousin work hard and he just fell on hard times. So why can't you place that onto people that you see outside? It is what it is, though.
This is solely your responsibility and your fault for not lifting yourself up by your bootstraps. And you know who else didn't bootstrap themselves enough? The gays. Oh, you thought the gays weren't part of this? Think again. Ever heard of a little thing called AIDS? Yeah, well, it was fucking rampant in the 80s. It started in the 70s, but no one really knew what it was, and by 1981, at the start of Reagan's presidency, it was becoming an epidemic.
Among the early researchers looking for both a cause and a cure was Dr. Anthony Fauci.
The plan is to put into clinical trials individuals who have full-blown AIDS.
Hundreds and then thousands and then tens of thousands of Americans were dying of it. And Reagan said nothing. The President of the United States said absolutely nothing for years. Because this was a disease of gay people and drug users. Two groups that decidedly were not constituents who voted for Reagan. People who mattered so little to him that a disease that was associated with them and killing thousands of Americans remained on his periphery until it wasn't.
That is crazy. You know that there's a disease that's spreading across America, and you choose to ignore it because it happened to be more found in people that want to date the same gender as them. So you choose to ignore it because it don't benefit you. Hey man, but these people could look in your face. Reagan was an amazing president. Come on, bro. Come on. And then you also think there's people alive who probably have friends who had AIDS. Gay people didn't just pop up out of nowhere. People have been gay all throughout the history of the universe. Okay? We probably just ain't have a word for it, but they been that. And it's like, oh my gosh, bro. I'm telling you, man, it could all be so simple. Why is you so worried about what another person do in they bedroom? But they all for free will and not being controlled by the government and all the other shit. But they're concerned themselves with what you do. Only because they can't control it. And only because it goes against their norms and their hierarchy and their way of believing and their ideology. It tells all this time. Do not take them serious. Barely acknowledge them. But remember, stay educated.
Rock Hudson was a major film star in the mid-20th century at the same time Reagan was still pursuing his acting career. Rock Hudson and the Reagans were friends. Rock Hudson was also gay. Rock Hudson was also the first major celebrity to die of AIDS-related complications in 1985. It took the death of a friend for Reagan to even give a shit about this disease that was killing thousands on his watch. And it would take him 2 more years before he even acknowledged the disease in an official press conference in 1987. By that time, over 30,000 people had contracted the disease and 20,000 people had died in the US alone. But again, even after he finally acknowledged the AIDS epidemic for what it was, he was reluctant to acknowledge it again. Funding for AIDS research under
Hey, y'all remember when people used to say you'll get AIDS for sitting down on a toilet? Boy, I tell you, man, that is crazy. They used to say that. They used to say that dumbass shit. You'll get AIDS for sitting on a toilet. I mean, there's probably people that happened to before, but the odds of that happening, once again, fear-mongering. Come on, man.
Reagan was slow to come, and it's unclear how the trajectory of the AIDS epidemic would have been different if Reagan had acknowledged it for what it was, a deadly and unknown disease that was killing thousands of Americans regardless of sexuality or drug use. Instead, it remained on the fringes of his presidency for years because, again, in the tidy imagination of his ideal American vision, you are the product of your own actions. You have only yourself to blame. You did gay sex. You injected drugs. Just bootstrap yourself out of AIDS. In this way, Reagan was able to disconnect.
Drink some milk, drink some orange juice. You know what I'm saying? Go for walks, get some sunlight. That is surely put away. Surely that would help your situation.
His policies from the outcomes of his policies. It's the moral failure of individuals, not anything he's done. It's one of the reasons that he's known as the Teflon president. Despite his many failures, and despite the many ways in which he was an incredibly imperfect president, he managed to avoid the reputational damage that most presidents experience and come out the other side as this mythical hero that Republicans still revere to this day. And nothing made more clear Reagan's lasting negative impact on our democracy like the presidency of Donald Trump. In both Donald Trump and Ronald Reagan, we had presidents who were also master showmen. And Reagan really introduced what Trump has seemed to perfect, manipulating the media to his advantage and using dog whistles to ignite his base of supporters. Nancy and Ronald Reagan were both actors before entering the White House. And Ronnie's abilities in front of the camera, his abilities to deliver a line, and his ability to provide a convincing song and dance routine came in handy time and again throughout his presidency. In the Reagans, the media finally had this showy, easily televised president they'd always dreamed of. The Reagans were always ready for a photo op because they understood the power of pictures. They understood that pictures often conveyed a stronger message than what was being said or going on behind the scenes. Sure, we're slashing your benefits, kowtowing to big business, and rubbing elbows with rich people during the worst recession since the Great Depression.
Oh, man. These are the pictures they post to people as they do the most heinous things in human history. They post a picture of them smiling ear to ear. This man done ruined millions of lives. This nigga had a hand in the way that your life is going right now. If you stressing about a union, if you worried about your bills, if you worried about these corporations having all this money, you looking at the man smiling ear to ear after he just fucked up your whole life. Damn.
We're also just like you. We're sunshiny and pleasant. We live on a ranch. were just a couple of cowboys. Reagan was able to use his acting experience to follow the scripts that were given to him, to position himself as folksy and all-American, and to build himself and his vision of America into this myth that still persists today. All the while, Reagan was able to use the media during his campaign for presidency and when he reached the White House to drop dog whistles for his supporters who were almost entirely white. And he was really the first person to perfect the dog whistle and use it to his political advantage. For example, he believed in the ultimate right of the individual, the right of the individual to own property and to do what he wanted with that property, including excluding whoever he wants from that property. Wink. He believes in states' rights. Wink. And he warned his supporters of the increased dangers in our cities, of welfare queens, and of a need for increased law and order to quell the, and I quote, jungle paths taking root throughout the country.
What?
Yikes. He was sunshiny and folksy, but in the end, Reagan was able to capitalize on what Trump later perfected. Fear. Fear of economic instability and fear of racial unrest. All the while fanning the flame of both issues and actively working against the best interest of the base that he is actively fear-mongering. And the final way that Reagan...
Ooh, that's crazy. They want you to be scared of a situation that they put you in. How does that not make you feel dumb? How does that not make you feel played as a person? You want to tell me to be scared of some shit that you started? Fix it. You go fix it. Man, I'm trying to tell you, I watched this YouTuber earlier today. He was pretty much saying if for white supremacy to go away and all this shit, the people that benefit from it has to be the ones to tackle it. Okay? Because y'all have the majority of y'all benefit from it. So if y'all want it to go away, if y'all really want it to be equal, y'all got to be the ones on the front line. You know what I'm saying? For all the ones out there that's going to say some shit like, we've been on the front line doing this and that. Whatever, okay. The least you could do, nigga, if you really want it to go away. You feel me? But for all the other ones who expect just other black people and minorities to just go out there and march and all that other shit, nah, bro. No. This is something your great-granddad or great-grandma did. Shit, probably your mom. Depending on how old your mama is. Shit, she probably voted for Reagan. You feel me? She probably still voted for Reagan-like figures. Come on, man. So this is the shit y'all gotta handle. Respectfully. Or disrespectfully, depending on how you feel.
Managed to undermine our democracy using a tactic that Trump later perfected was by aligning himself and the Republican Party with white evangelical Christians. The Christian right presented themselves as an opportunity for Reagan. They aligned on many of the same social issues like abortion and tax cuts, and especially the idea of the individual's responsibility for their own fate, that bootstrapping ideology that Reagan clung to. If you need welfare, it's because you're lazy and you should just get a job. If you don't want to go to hell, you're a sinner and it's up to you to get into heaven. Any moral failure, and it's straight to the bowels of hell for you. Not only that, but it turns out the evangelicals have a lot of money. One group of the religious right that had particular sway was called the Moral Majority. It fought against abortion, the Equal Rights Amendment, and in favor of the family and traditional...
It fought against the Equal Rights Amendment? Oh my God. Bro, what? How does that even make sense? They fought against the Equal Rights Amendment. How can you even follow an organization, sign up for an organization that's fighting against equal rights, bro? Like, what? That should be where you draw the line at as a person. Like, that shouldn't even, what? But obviously, the greatest president, or one of the greatest presidents of all time, linked up with him. So...
family values. It was founded in the 70s as a response to counterculture and the gay rights and women's rights movements of the previous decades, and it had a powerful lobbying arm. The Moral Majority is credited with helping Reagan win the 1980 presidential election. It was through the Moral Majority and Christian fundamentalists that Reagan was able to find a strong and fervent base of supporters. So it was, of course...
Sound like some Turning Point shit. You know what I'm saying? And we seeing what's happening at Turning Point, but that's what it sounds like to me, but for the newer generation. We going to college campuses, debating them, all type of stuff to seem as if your argument is so superior to theirs that there's no way to go against it. But there's a reason why he debated certain people. And when he did step out of bounds, when he did go to, what school was it? It was in the UK? It was somewhere, I forgot. He got cooked. Or was it Colombia? He got cooked. You know what I'm saying? So that should let you know. That should let you know.
In his best interest to make religion take a center stage in his politics. At the 1984 Republican convention, Reagan addressed a group of Christians saying, "The truth is, politics and morality are inseparable. And as morality's foundation is religion, religion and politics are necessarily related." He concluded, "If we ever forget that we're one nation under God, then we will be a nation gone under." So much for separation of church and state, am I right? And it was a tactic that worked. It brought more blue-collar and working-class people behind him, and it increased his appeal in the South, a place where his 1980 presidential rival Jimmy Carter typically held favor as the hometown hero. And this allegiance that Reagan struck with the white Christians has stuck to this day. And it was this same base that Trump was able to tap into to win, despite the fact that he's not religious, despite the fact that he actively worked against the best interests of the blue-collar and working-class people who voted for him, largely because of the ideals he espoused and dog whistles he used to appeal to that base. And it's that link between the Republican Party and evangelicals that has led to the rise of Christian nationalists, to the increase in hateful legislation aimed at trans kids and drag queens, to the dismantling of Roe v. Wade, to the banning of critical race theory and books that present
Stop teaching critical race theory.
Any ideas contrary to the conservative, Christian, nationalist worldview. Over and over again, Reagan did what he had to do to cement power for himself and his rich and powerful supporters. Whether it was cutting taxes, busting unions, or leaning into racist stereotypes and dog whistles, he did whatever he had to do to get what he wanted. His incredibly short-sighted policies and actions while in the White House led to increased economic and social division in America, to a growing distrust between Democrats and Republicans, and to the growth of a strong but small faction of radical conservatives who are using fear-mongering and capitalizing on what divides us in order to further erode our democracy. No, you can't pin everything that's happening in America today onto one man. But I double dog dare you to find a person or a president who is more culpable for the current social, political, and economic instability than President Ronald Reagan. And I haven't even touched on his stance on communism. Stay tuned for next week when I answer the question, why are Americans so obsessed with communism? For now, check out my latest video all about why America is still segregated.
Ooh, okay, I might have to watch that, Legia. All right, shout out Legia Miller for the video. You did your thing. Like I said in the beginning, bro, fuck Ronald Reagan, man. All the things that he did, we are seeing now. And it's so crazy that the same people, you know what? The apple don't fall far from the tree. The same people that's falling for Donald Trump shit, their parents fell for Reagan shit. You know what I'm saying? You know, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and expecting a different result? I'm gone. Peace.